The red warning lights flashed across every screen in the new Terra mining colony control room. Commander Jake Martinez stared at the readings with growing horror as the numbers climbed higher and higher. The solar flare heading toward their planet was massive, bigger than anything they had ever seen before. "How long do we have?" Jake asked his chief engineer, a young woman named Kate Sullivan, who was frantically typing commands into her console. 6 hours before it hits us, Kate replied, her voice shaking. "Maybe 7 if we're lucky. The atmospheric processors can't handle this much energy. They'll overload and shut down completely." Jake felt his stomach drop. Without the atmospheric processors, every human on New Terra would be dead within hours. The planet's natural atmosphere was poison to humans, and they had no backup systems. "That could protect 50,000 people. Can we evacuate?" Jake asked, even though he already knew the answer. "Not possible, sir," replied Lieutenant Bob Chun from the communications station. "We have maybe 20 transport ships total. Each one can carry 100 people at most. We'd need weeks to get everyone off the planet." Jake closed his eyes and tried to think. There had to be something they could do, some solution they hadn't considered yet. But deep down, he knew they were out of options. Human technology simply wasn't advanced enough to deal with a solar flare of this size. That's when Elder Voss appeared in the doorway. The Zilani was tall and thin, his crystalline skin reflecting the red emergency lights in strange patterns. Like all of his people, Voss looked like he was carved from living diamond, beautiful and alien at the same time. He had been the leader of the small Zilani community that worked alongside the humans on New Terra for the past 5 years. "Commander Martinez," Voss said in his strange musical voice, "I have been monitoring your situation. You are in great danger." "Elder Voss," Jake said, turning to face the alien, "yes, we know. We're trying to find a solution, but our technology isn't strong enough to protect us from this solar flare." Voss was quiet for a long moment, his large, multifaceted eyes studying the humans in the room. Finally, he spoke again. "There is a way to save your people, but it would require me to break the most sacred laws of my kind." Jake felt a spark of hope. "What do you mean?" "My people possess ancient technology that can create energy shields strong enough to protect your entire colony," Voss explained. "But our laws forbid us from sharing this technology with younger races. It is considered interference with natural development." "But you could do it?" Kate asked, stepping forward. "You could actually save us?" "I could," Voss said slowly. "But if I do this, I will be exiled from my people forever. I will never be allowed to return to the Zilani homeworld. I will be cast out alone until the end of my days." The control room fell silent except for the constant beeping of alarms. Jake looked around at his people, at Kate with her young face full of hope, at Bob who had 3 children back on Earth, at all the others who were counting on him to find a way to save them. "Elder Voss," Jake said carefully, "I can't ask you to sacrifice everything for us. That wouldn't be right." Voss tilted his head in the way that Zilani did when they were thinking deeply. "You are not asking, Commander. I am choosing. Your people have shown mine nothing but kindness during our time here. You have shared your food, your stories, your friendship. You treat us as equals, not as superior beings or primitive creatures. This is rare in the galaxy." Jake felt tears starting to form in his eyes. "But your exile... your people will understand eventually," Voss said, "or they will not. Either way, I cannot stand by and watch 50,000 innocent beings die when I have the power to prevent it." Without waiting for a response, Voss walked to an empty console and began working. His crystalline fingers moved across the controls in patterns that the humans couldn't follow. Strange symbols appeared on the screen, written in the flowing script of the Zilani language. "What are you doing?" Kate asked, watching in fascination. "I am calling upon the old technology," Voss explained as he worked. "Energy shields that were built into this planet's core long ago, when my people first explored this sector. They have been dormant for centuries, but they can still be awakened. The process took 3 hours. During that time, Voss never stopped working, never took a break, never even paused to rest. The humans watched in amazement as readings on their own screens began to change. Energy patterns they had never seen before started appearing around the planet. Then, just as the solar flare reached New Terra, something incredible happened. A shimmering barrier of pure energy formed around the entire planet, deflecting the deadly radiation harmlessly into space. The atmospheric processors stayed online. The colony was safe, but even as the humans cheered and celebrated, Voss received a message on his personal communicator. Jake couldn't understand the Zilani language, but he could see the sadness in Voss's eyes as he read it. "They know what I have done," Voss said quietly. "I am officially exiled from my people. I must leave this place and never return to Zilani space." Jake walked over to the alien who had just saved his entire world. Without hesitation, he grabbed Voss's crystalline hands in his own human ones. "Elder Voss," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion, "I swear to you on everything I hold sacred that humanity will never forget what you have done for us today. We will never forget your sacrifice. And someday, somehow, we will find a way to repay you for this gift." Voss looked confused by the intensity of Jake's words. To him, it was just emotional human babbling. He had no way of knowing that humans took promises like this very seriously. "Thank you, Commander," Voss said simply. "Take care of your people." 3 days later, Voss left New Terra on a small ship, heading out into the unknown regions of space. As his ship disappeared from their sensors, Jake called together all the senior staff of the colony. "I want everything about Elder Voss documented," he told them. "His full name, his family background, his personal history, everything we know about him and his sacrifice. This goes into our official records as the first entry in something I'm calling the Debt of New Terra." Kate looked puzzled. "Sir, what exactly is the Debt of New Terra?" Jake stared out at the stars where Voss had disappeared. "It's humanity's promise that we never forget the people who help us when they don't have to. And more importantly, it's our promise that we always find a way to pay them back." 20 years had passed since the incident on New Terra, and the galaxy had grown more connected as trade routes expanded and new species made contact with each other. On the massive trade station Meridian Point, thousands of beings from dozens of different worlds came together to buy and sell goods from across known space. Zexvi checked her inventory lists one more time as she prepared for another day of trading. She was a young Korathi merchant, barely into her adult years by her species standards. Her people were natural traders, with their ability to sense emotions making them excellent at reading potential customers. But Zexvi was still learning the business, and every sale mattered to her small operation. The Korathi were insect-like beings with 4 arms and large, compound eyes that could see in multiple spectrums of light. Zexvi's chitin was a deep blue color that marked her as coming from the northern regions of her homeworld. She had been working the trade stations for only 2 years, trying to build up enough credits to expand her family's trading business. That morning, she was organizing her stall of rare minerals when she overheard a conversation at the cantina next to her shop. 3 beings were talking in low voices, but Zexvi's sensitive hearing picked up every word. "The human cargo ship leaves Dock 7 tonight," said a voice she recognized as belonging to Crag, a notorious Vuthak pirate. "Full load of medical supplies bound for the Antares colonies." "Easy target. What about escorts?" asked another voice. "None," Crag replied with a laugh. "Humans are too trusting. They think the trade routes are safe. We hit them in the Nebula of Sorrows, take the cargo, and disappear before anyone knows what happened." Zexvi felt her stomach turn. She had done business with human traders before, and they had always been fair and honest with her. Unlike some species who looked down on young Korathi merchants, the humans treated her with respect and paid good prices for her goods. She knew she should mind her own business. Getting involved with pirates was dangerous, and she had her own family to think about. But something about the idea of innocent humans being attacked didn't sit right with her. 2 hours before the human ship was scheduled to leave, Zexvi made her decision. She closed her stall early and hurried to the docking bay, where the human cargo vessel was loading its final supplies. The ship was called the Morning Star, and its captain was a middle-aged human woman named Lisa Rodriguez. HFY had traded with Captain Rodriguez several times over the past year, and the human had always been kind to her. "Captain Rodriguez," HFY called out as she approached the loading ramp. "I need to speak with you urgently." Lisa looked up from her manifest. Datapad and smiled when she saw the young Karathi. "HFY, good to see you. Are you here to sell us some last-minute supplies?" "No, Captain," HFY said, her voice nervous. "I'm here to warn you. There are pirates planning to attack your ship in the Nebula of Sorrows. They know about your medical cargo, and they're waiting for you." Lisa's expression immediately became serious. "Are you certain about this information?" "I overheard them planning it," HFY explained. "Crag the Vuthak and his crew. They said you have no escorts and they think you'll be an easy target." Lisa was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she activated her communicator. "Rodriguez to station security. I need to report a planned pirate attack." She looked back at HFY. "Thank you for warning us. This cargo contains vaccines for a plague outbreak on Antares 3. If those pirates had taken it, thousands of people could have died." "I just did what was right," HFY said, feeling embarrassed by the gratitude in the human's voice, but Lisa wasn't finished. "HFY, I need to ask you some questions, if you don't mind, for our records." HFY was confused but agreed. Lisa pulled out a recording device and began asking questions that seemed strange for a cargo ship captain. She wanted to know about HFY's family, her homeworld, her dreams for the future, her favorite foods, even details about Karathi culture and traditions. "Why do you need to know all this?" HFY asked. "Because what you did today saved lives," Lisa explained. "And humans have a policy about people who save lives. We remember everything about them. Everything." HFY didn't understand why this was important, but she answered all the questions anyway. When they were done, Lisa shook her hand in the human custom and promised that humanity would not forget what she had done. 3 months later, on a mining station in the Vega system, something similar happened. Dr. Krell, an elderly Thraxian medic, was treating patients in the station's small medical bay when a group of human miners came in suffering from an unknown illness. The Thraxians were a reptilian species known for their advanced medical knowledge. Dr. Krell had been working on frontier stations for decades, treating anyone who needed help regardless of their species or ability to pay. "I've never seen symptoms like this before," Dr. Krell told the human mining foreman, a man named Pete Johnson. "But I believe it may be related to exposure to quantum crystals in the asteroid belt you've been working." Dr. Krell spent 3 days running tests and analyzing samples. He discovered that the quantum crystals were releasing a rare form of radiation that was slowly poisoning the human miners. Worse, he realized that without treatment, the condition would spread to other humans and eventually become fatal. "I have the cure," Dr. Krell told Pete. "But I need to share the formula with your medical services so they can produce it in large quantities. This could affect thousands of humans working in similar conditions across the galaxy." Dr. Krell provided the complete medical data to the humans, including detailed research that had taken his people centuries to develop. He saved not just the miners on the station, but potentially thousands of other humans who might have been exposed to the same radiation. A week later, Dr. Krell received a visit from a human medical officer named Colonel Amy Foster. Like Captain Rodriguez before her, Colonel Foster asked detailed questions about Dr. Krell's life, his family, his research, and his people's medical traditions. "We're documenting everything about you and what you've done for us," Colonel Foster explained. "Humanity keeps very detailed records of kindness." Similar incidents occurred across human space over the following years. Commander Yith, an old Vorthan pilot, shared navigational data that prevented a human exploration fleet from flying into a black hole. A Nexari engineer named Paltem helped repair a human research station's life support systems during a critical emergency. A young Altarian diplomat named Sira Ka intervened to prevent a trade dispute that could have led to war between humans and another species. Each time, the humans responded with what seemed like excessive gratitude. They asked endless questions. recorded everything, and made promises about never forgetting. Other species began to notice this pattern and talk about it among themselves. Humans are so emotional, the Karathi traders would say to each other. They get worked up over the smallest favors. It's just their nature, the Thraxan doctors agreed. They feel everything too strongly. It makes them unstable. The Vorthans, who prided themselves on being logical, found human behavior particularly puzzling. They waste so much time and energy documenting meaningless details, they would discuss in their philosophy circles. No wonder they're such a young species. But what none of these species realized was that the humans weren't just being emotional or wasteful. In secret facilities across human space, vast databases were being compiled. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, was being recorded in what humans had started calling the Favor Archive. The archive contained everything. Not just the names of those who had helped humans, but detailed information about their families, their cultures, their needs, their weaknesses, their dreams, and their fears. Human intelligence officers studied these files constantly, updating them with new information whenever possible. Jake Martinez, now an admiral in the human fleet, often visited the archive facilities. The debt of New Terra had grown into something much larger than he had ever imagined. Thousands of entries filled the databases, each one representing someone who had shown kindness to humanity when they didn't have to. "Sir," one of the archive technicians said to him during a routine visit, "we've just received an update on HFY, the Karathi merchant who warned Captain Rodriguez about the pirates. She's started her own trading company and is doing well, but her species is facing some economic pressure from the hegemony expansion." Jake nodded and made a note. "Keep monitoring the situation. And make sure we have current information on all her family members and business associates." "Yes, sir, and Admiral? We've just received word that Elder Voss has been located. He's living in poverty on a salvage station in the Outer Rim." Jake felt a familiar fire burning in his chest. Elder Voss, the being who had started it all, living in poverty while humanity grew stronger every day. "Add him to the priority list," Jake ordered, "and start preparing contingency plans for all our archived entries. Something tells me we're going to need them soon." 40 years had passed since Elder Voss saved New Terra, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The hegemony, a militaristic alliance of 7 aggressive species, had begun expanding their territory through conquest and intimidation. What had started as small border conflicts had grown into a campaign of systematic destruction that threatened every peaceful civilization in known space. On the salvage station Broken Dreams, Elder Voss sorted through scrap metal with hands that shook from age and malnutrition. The once proud Zelani leader now looked like a shadow of his former self. His crystalline skin, which had once reflected light in beautiful patterns, was now dull and cracked. His exile had lasted decades, and he had been forced to take whatever work he could find to survive. The other workers on the station barely tolerated him. Zelani were considered bad luck by most spacers, especially exiled ones. Voss had learned to keep his head down and work quietly, grateful for whatever credits he could earn to buy food and shelter. He was loading a cart with broken engine parts when the news broadcast began playing on the station's public screens. The announcer's voice echoed through the work area, bringing word of the latest hegemony victory. "The Zelani homeworld of Kristalla has fallen to hegemony forces," the announcer said in a cold, professional tone. "Reports indicate that the planet's unique crystal formations are being harvested for military purposes. The surviving Zelani population has been relocated to processing centers for evaluation." Voss dropped the metal parts he was carrying. Around him, other workers continued their tasks, barely interested in news about another conquered world. But for Voss, this was the end of everything. His people, already broken by his exile decades ago, were now slaves or worse, halfway across the galaxy. HFY sat in her trading company's headquarters on Meridian Point, staring at similar news broadcasts with growing fear. The Karathi had always been peaceful merchants, relying on trade agreements and diplomatic immunity to protect themselves. But the hegemony didn't care about such niceties. "They've blockaded the Kalos trade route," her business partner Denko reported as he entered her office. That's the third major rip they've cut off this month. Our profit margins are already down 60%. HFY's compound eyes focused on the star charts displayed on her wall. Red markers showed hegemony territory, growing larger every month like a cancer spreading through space. It's not just about profits anymore, she said quietly. They're trying to destroy our entire way of life. Her fears were confirmed a week later when hegemony representatives arrived at Meridian Point with an ultimatum. The Korathi would cease all independent trading and become suppliers for the hegemony war machine or face the same fate as the Zilani. We need more time to consider, HFY told the hegemony commander, a massive Krex warrior whose species formed the backbone of the alliance. You have 3 days, the commander replied. After that, we will consider your silence to be a declaration of hostility. In the Anteri system, Dr. Krell received news that made his old heart feel like ice. The hegemony had declared the Thraxian species to be a threat to galactic security because of their advanced medical knowledge. Thraxian doctors were being arrested across the galaxy, accused of developing biological weapons. It's madness, Dr. Krell told his assistant, a young Thraxian named Velna. We're healers, not warriors. Our knowledge has saved millions of lives across dozens of species. They don't care, Velna replied, her voice shaking with fear. The reports say they're planning to execute all Thraxian medical personnel to prevent our knowledge from being used against them. Dr. Krell looked at the medical research he had spent his lifetime developing. Cures for diseases, treatments for injuries, genetic therapies that could save entire species from extinction. All of it would be lost if the hegemony had their way. Commander Yith, now ancient even by Vorthan standards, watched from his retirement home as hegemony ships surrounded his people's philosophical centers. The Vorthans had always believed that logic and reason could solve any conflict, but the hegemony had no interest in debate or discussion. They're demanding that we provide them with our navigational technology, Yith's grandson informed him during a visit. The same technology you shared with the humans all those years ago. Yith's old eyes grew sad. If we give it to them, they'll use it to attack other worlds more efficiently. If we refuse, they'll destroy us to prevent anyone else from having it. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as every species that had once helped humanity found themselves facing destruction or enslavement. The Nexari engineers were being forced to build weapons for the hegemony. The Altarian diplomats were being silenced to prevent them from organizing resistance. One by one, the voices of peace and cooperation in the galaxy were being eliminated. The galactic community watched these events with a mixture of fear and resignation. The hegemony was simply too powerful to resist. Their combined fleets outnumbered any possible opposition, and their willingness to use extreme violence had broken the spirit of most potential enemies. Many species looked toward human space, hoping that the relatively young but growing civilization might offer some form of resistance. But humans had remained notably quiet during the hegemony's expansion. Their diplomats offered sympathy and humanitarian aid to refugees, but they made no military commitments or threats. The humans are cowards, some alien leaders said privately. They're too concerned with protecting their own territory to care about the rest of us. Can you blame them? Others replied. They're still a minor power compared to the hegemony. It would be suicide for them to get involved. But in the secret chambers of the Human High Council on Earth, a very different conversation was taking place. Admiral Jake Martinez, now in his 70s but still sharp as a blade, stood before the assembled leaders of humanity with a thick data file in his hands. The situation is clear, Jake said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of planning. Every major species that has ever shown kindness to humanity is now under threat from the hegemony. The Zilani are enslaved. The Korathi face economic destruction. The Thraxians are marked for genocide. The Vorthans are being forced to choose between collaboration and annihilation. President Carol Washington, a woman who had risen through the ranks of human government partly due to her understanding of the Favor Archive project, nodded grimly. "How many entries in the archive are affected?" "Over 3,000, replied Admiral Ben Carter, Jake's former student who now oversaw the archive operations. "Every significant favor we've ever received is connected to someone who's now in danger." The council chamber fell silent as the weight of those numbers settled in. 3,000 acts of kindness, large and small, stretching back 4 decades. 3,000 debts that humanity had carefully documented and prepared to repay. "The hegemony has made a fatal error," Jake continued, opening his data file to reveal detailed military plans. "They've threatened the wrong people at the wrong time. They have no idea what humanity has become while they were busy conquering other worlds." President Washington looked around the room at the other council members. "Are we certain we're ready for this? Once we commit to this course of action, there's no going back." Admiral Carter smiled, and there was something predatory in his expression. "Ma'am, we've been ready for this since the day Elder Voss saved New Terra. We've just been waiting for the right moment to show the galaxy what happens when someone threatens our friends." Jake Martinez placed his hand on the table and looked each council member in the eye. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to pay our debts, all of them." The vote was unanimous. Within hours, secret messages began flowing out from human space to resistance. Cells, underground networks, and hidden allies across the galaxy. The messages were encrypted using codes that only the recipients would understand, containing references to shared memories and private conversations from years or decades past. Elder Voss, sorting scrap on broken dreams, found a message hidden in his daily ration delivery. It contained a single line in ancient Zalani script: "The dead of New Terra remembers you." HFY discovered a coded transmission buried in routine trade data. When decoded, it read, "The morning star flies again," for those who warned of pirates. Dr. Krell received medical supplies with a note attached. "The cure you gave us was just the beginning." Commander Yeath found a navigation chart in his personal mail with coordinates that spelled out a message: "Safe passage is owed to those who prevented others from becoming lost." The hegemony's intelligence services noticed the increased human communications traffic, but their codebreakers couldn't make sense of the transmissions. They seemed to be random commercial data, scientific reports, and cultural exchanges. Nothing that suggested military planning or coordination. They had no idea that humanity had just activated the largest intelligence network in galactic history, built not through coercion or payment, but through 4 decades of careful kindness and meticulous record-keeping. The galaxy was about to learn what it really meant when humans said they never forgot a favor. The first sign that something had changed came when the massive human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of hegemony territory. The ships that appeared were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. Sleek vessels that seemed to bend light around them, weapons platforms that hummed with unknown energy, and support craft that carried technologies that defied current understanding of physics. But what shocked the hegemony commanders most was the sheer size of the fleet. Intelligence reports had suggested that humanity possessed maybe 200 warships total. Instead, over 5,000 vessels had appeared seemingly from nowhere, arranged in perfect formation like they had been preparing for this moment for decades. The flagship of this impossible armada bore a name that made no sense to hegemony. Observers, HSS Elder Voss, around it. Hundreds of other ships carried equally mysterious names: HFY's warning, Dr. Krell's cure, Yith's navigation, Morning Star's gift. Each vessel seemed to be named after people and events that meant nothing to anyone except humans. Admiral Ben Carter stood on the bridge of the Elder Voss, looking out at the enemy positions with calm satisfaction. Beside him, a holographic display showed the locations of every hegemony ship, station, and installation within 100 light-years. The information was so detailed and current that it included crew schedules, supply manifests, and personal communications between commanders. "Sir," reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Steve Morgan, "we're receiving surrender demands from the Hegemony 4th Fleet. They're ordering us to withdraw or face destruction." Ben smiled without humor. "Tell them that humanity doesn't negotiate with slavers, and tell them that we're here to collect some debts. What happened next redefined galactic warfare forever. The human fleet didn't just attack. They executed the most precise military operation in recorded history. Instead of the brutal frontal assaults that characterized hegemony tactics, the humans struck with surgical precision at exactly the right targets at exactly the right moments. Hegemony. Communication networks went down simultaneously across dozens of systems, cut at specific relay points that their own engineers didn't even know existed. Supply convoys found themselves surrounded by human ships that seemed to know their exact routes and schedules. Command posts discovered that their secure locations had been compromised and were being bombarded by weapons that could reach them from impossible distances. But the truly shocking part wasn't the military precision. It was what the humans did during and after their attacks on the enslaved world of Kristalla. Human Marines didn't just liberate the Zilani processing centers. They arrived with medical equipment specifically designed for crystalline physiology, food grown in hydroponic bays to match Zilani nutritional needs, and most incredibly, technology that could repair the damaged crystal formations that were the foundation of Zilani culture. The human commander who met with the freed Zilani prisoners was Colonel Rick Thompson, a man who had studied Zilani culture for 30 years specifically for this moment. He spoke their language fluently, understood their customs, and knew the names and histories of their leaders. "Where is Elder Voss?" he asked the first group of refugees they rescued. "Voss was exiled decades ago," replied Maltera, an elderly Zilani who remembered the old days. "Why do you ask about him?" "Because," Colonel Thompson said solemnly, "your people saved 50,000 human lives 40 years ago. We've come to return the favor." Within hours, human ships were racing toward Broken Dreams Station. They found Elder Voss exactly where. Their intelligence report said he would be sorting scrap metal to earn enough credits for his next meal. The old Zilani looked up in confusion as armed human soldiers approached his workstation. "Elder Voss?" said the squad leader, a young woman named Captain Linda Hayes. "My name is Captain Hayes of the Human Fleet. I'm here to inform you that your exile is over." Voss stared at her with ancient, tired eyes. "I do not understand." "Humans have no authority over Zilani law." "We're not using authority," Captain Hayes replied. "We're using something more powerful. We're using gratitude." The rescue ship that carried Voss away from Broken Dreams was just the beginning. Human medical teams had spent decades developing life extension treatments specifically for Zilani physiology. By the time they reached the liberated homeworld, Voss had already begun to look younger and stronger, but the humans weren't finished. They had brought with them something that made even Voss weep: the complete cultural archives of his people, preserved from before the exile, and new crystal-growing technology that would restore Kristalla to a beauty greater than it had ever possessed. Meanwhile, at Meridian Point, HFY watched in amazement as human warships drove off the hegemony blockade with an ease that seemed impossible. But the real shock came when the human fleet commander requested a personal meeting with her. Admiral Patricia Kim sat across from HFY in her trading company office, smiling warmly at the Korathi merchant who had once risked her life to warn a human cargo ship about pirates. "HFY," Admiral Kim said, 20 years ago, you saved a shipment of medical supplies that prevented thousands of deaths on Antares 3. Today, we are here to make sure that you and your people never have to worry about trade routes again." The Admiral gestured to her aide, who placed a datapad on HFY's desk. The information it contained made the Korathi's compound eyes widen in disbelief. "Complete navigational charts for hyperspace routes that your people never knew existed," Admiral Kim explained. "Trade agreements with 17 species who are eager to do business with the Korathi, and exclusive access to human technology. That will make your ships faster and more efficient than anything else in the galaxy." "But why?" HFY asked, her voice barely a whisper. "This is worth more than my entire people's economy." "Because you showed kindness to strangers when you didn't have to," Admiral Kim replied. "And humans never forget that kind of courage." In the Antares system, Dr. Krell received visitors that he had never expected to see again. A full human medical expedition arrived at his small clinic, led by scientists who had been studying Thraxian medicine for decades. "Dr. Krell," said the expedition leader, Dr. Susan Park, "your formula saved thousands of human miners from quantum crystal poisoning. But more than that, you shared medical knowledge that helped us develop treatments for dozens of other conditions." Dr. Krell looked at the advanced medical equipment the humans were unloading from their ships. Machines that could diagnose diseases he had only dreamed of curing, genetic sequencers that could map the DNA of any species in minutes, surgical robots precise enough to operate on individual cells. "We've spent 20 years advancing medical science based on principles you taught us," Dr. Park continued. "This technology represents the combined medical knowledge of both our species. We're giving it to you and your people freely because that's what you did for us." But the humans went further than just sharing technology. They had brought with them a declaration signed by the leaders of 43 species, officially recognizing the Thraxians as the galaxy's premier medical authority and granting them protective status that would prevent anyone from threatening them again. Commander Yith, in his retirement home, received a visit from Captain Alex Miller, a human navigation officer who had spent 15 years studying Vorthan space travel techniques. "Commander Yith," Captain Miller said, "your navigational data prevented an entire human exploration fleet from being destroyed. Because of your help, we discovered 12 habitable worlds and made contact with 6 new species." The old Vorthan listened as Captain Miller explained the gift humanity was bringing to his people: access to human hyperspace technology that would revolutionize space travel for everyone, and detailed star charts mapping safe passages through regions of space that had been considered impossible to navigate. "Your people value knowledge and exploration above all else," Captain Miller said. "We're giving you the keys to explore parts of the galaxy that no one has ever seen before." As these individual rescues and repayments took place, the larger human fleet continued its systematic dismantling of the hegemony war machine, but they didn't just destroy, they rebuilt. Every world they liberated received aid specifically tailored to that species' needs and culture. Every freed population found that the humans somehow knew exactly what they required to rebuild their civilization. The galaxy watched in stunned amazement as humanity revealed the true scope of their preparation. This wasn't a hastily assembled military response. This was the result of 40 years of careful planning, studying, and preparation. Every act of kindness shown to humans had been researched, analyzed, and prepared for with an attention to detail that bordered on the obsessive. The hegemony tried to counterattack, but found that their every move had been anticipated. Human intelligence networks that had been built through gratitude rather than coercion provided information that was both incredibly detailed and absolutely reliable. Species that had been neutral in the conflict suddenly found reasons to support the humans, often because of some long-forgotten favor that was now being repaid within 6 months. The Hegemony Alliance had collapsed completely. Their leaders found themselves facing war crimes tribunals organized by the very species they had tried to enslave. 2 years after the fall of the hegemony, the galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have imagined. The great crystal spires of New Crystalla rose toward the stars, more beautiful than the original Zilani homeworld had ever been. Trade routes hummed with Korathi merchant ships equipped with technology that made them the fastest vessels in known space. Thraxian medical centers had become places of pilgrimage for beings seeking cures that had been impossible just years before. Elder Voss stood in the central chamber of the newly completed Galactic Cooperation Council, a massive space station that orbited the neutral star of Harmony Prime. As the first chairman of the council, he had watched dozens of species come together to create something unprecedented, a galactic government based on cooperation rather than conquest. The station itself was a marvel of joint engineering. Zilani crystal technology provided the energy systems. Human manufacturing created the structure. Korathi trade networks supplied the materials, and Thraxian life support systems kept everyone healthy. It was a physical symbol of what could be accomplished when species worked together. Instead of fighting each other. Today was special because they were welcoming 3 new species into the council. These were civilizations that had been discovered by the exploration fleets that were now mapping the galaxy using combined human and Vorthan navigation technology. Each new member brought their own gifts and perspectives to the growing alliance. Admiral Ben Carter, now serving as the human representative to the council, watched the ceremonies with satisfaction. The Favor Archive had grown beyond anything its creators had imagined. Instead of just tracking debts owed to humanity, it had become a database of positive interactions between all member species. Every act of cooperation, every shared discovery, every moment of mutual aid was carefully recorded and celebrated. "Admiral Carter," called a familiar voice behind him. He turned to see HFY approaching, her blue chiton now marked with gold patterns that indicated her new status as a Korathi trade ambassador. "HFY," Ben smiled, "or should I say Ambassador HFY. How are the new trade agreements working?" "Out? Better than we ever dreamed," she replied, her compound eyes bright with excitement. "The shipping routes you helped us establish have increased trade volume by 400%. My people are more prosperous than they've ever been in our history." Ben nodded, but his expression grew thoughtful. "And how do your people feel about their prosperity coming from humans? Some species have had trouble accepting that level of debt." HFY's mandibles clicked in what humans had learned was the Korathi equivalent of laughter. "That's what makes your species so fascinating, Admiral. You don't see it as debt at all, do you? You see it as investment in friendship." Before Ben could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Krell, who, despite his advanced age, had insisted on attending the ceremony in person. The elderly Thraxian moved slowly, but with dignity, supported by medical equipment that extended his life far beyond what should have been possible. "Dr. Krell," Ben said warmly, "I'm surprised to see you here. Shouldn't you be resting?" The old doctor's scaled face creased in what might have been a smile. "Admiral, I have lived to see my people become the medical guardians of the galaxy. Thraxian doctors now work on every council world, sharing knowledge that saves millions of lives each year. How could I miss celebrating the addition of 3 new worlds to our community?" The conversation was interrupted by an announcement that the ceremony was about to begin. As they took their seats, Ben reflected on how much had changed since the dark days of the hegemony threat. The 3 new species being welcomed today were perfect examples of how the council worked. The Keth were master architects whose buildings could adapt to any environment. The Nelori were artists whose work could convey emotions across species barriers. The Zimbari were farmers who could grow food in conditions that would kill most crops. Each species had something unique to offer, and each would receive benefits that were specifically tailored to their needs and culture. The Keth would get access to human construction materials and Zilani energy systems. The Nelori would receive Korathi distribution networks to share their art across the galaxy. The Zimbari would benefit from Thraxian soil science and Vorthan climate modeling, but more importantly, each new member meant 3 more entries in the expanded Favor Archive. 3 more species whose acts of kindness would be remembered and repaid. 3 more allies who would know that cooperation was more powerful than conquest. Elder Voss stepped forward to address the assembled delegates, his crystalline form catching the light from the station's energy cores. When he spoke, his words were translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. "My friends," he began, "today we welcome new members to our council, but more than that. We celebrate a new way of thinking about galactic civilization. For too long, strength was measured by the ability to take from others. Today, we measure strength by the ability to give to others." The audience listened intently as Voss continued. "The humans taught us something that no species had learned before. That kindness is not weakness and that gratitude is not servitude. When humanity saved my people, they did not demand tribute or territory. They asked for nothing except the opportunity to help others in the same way." From his seat, Ben felt a familiar warmth in his chest. The same feeling he had experienced As a young officer, when Jake Martinez first explained the debt of New Terra, the knowledge that humanity had found its true purpose not in conquest or expansion, but in the simple act of remembering kindness and repaying it with interest. The hegemony failed because they believed that fear was stronger than friendship, Voss continued. They thought that forcing obedience was easier than earning cooperation. They were wrong on every level. Fear creates enemies, but friendship creates families. After the ceremony, Ben found himself in a quiet observation lounge with several other founding members of the council. Commander Yith, now ancient but still sharp, sat with his grandson who had become a renowned navigator. Dr. Krell dozed in his medical chair while his assistant monitored his vital signs. HFY was reviewing trade data on her personal device, planning new routes that would benefit the newest council members. "Admiral," said Commander Yith, "I have a question that has bothered me for years. When you humans first started documenting our acts of kindness, did you already know that this day would come? Did you plan for the council from the beginning?" Ben considered the question carefully. "No, Commander. When Jake Martinez created the debt of New Terra, he was just trying to honor Elder Voss's sacrifice. The archive grew organically from there. But I think humanity understood instinctively that kindness creates connections, and connections create possibilities. So you're saying that humans didn't plan to build a galactic civilization based on gratitude?" Yith pressed. "Not exactly," Ben replied. "We planned to remember every favor and repay it appropriately. Everything else grew naturally from that simple commitment." HFY looked up from her datapad. "That's what makes it so terrifying and so beautiful at the same time. Humans don't just remember favors, you remember everything. Every conversation, every gesture, every moment of kindness or cruelty. Your entire species is like a living archive of galactic behavior." Dr. Krell stirred from his doze. "And you respond appropriately to all of it," he added. "Kindness is repaid with greater kindness. Cruelty is met with justice. It's like having a universal moral force in the galaxy." Ben nodded slowly. "Maybe that's what we are. Maybe that's what humanity was meant to become. Not conquerors or explorers or even peacekeepers. Maybe we're meant to be the galaxy's memory, making sure that good deeds are rewarded and evil acts have consequences." The conversation was interrupted by a communication from Earth. President Washington appeared on the lounge's main screen. Smiling broadly, "Admiral Carter," she said, "I have good news." The council vote was unanimous. "We're approved to begin the next phase of the exploration program. 50 joint expeditions will launch next month to make contact with species beyond our current borders." Ben felt excitement building in his chest. "How many ships per expedition?" "Each expedition will include representatives from at least 5 council species," the president replied. "We're going to introduce the galaxy to the idea of cooperation from the very first contact. No more single-species exploration, no more first contacts based on individual agendas." After the communication ended, the group sat in comfortable silence, for a while watching the stars through the observation windows. Ships from dozens of worlds moved through space around them, carrying goods and passengers and ideas between worlds that had once been strangers. "You know what I find most remarkable about all this?" HFY said eventually. "What's that?" Ben asked. "When I warned Captain Rodriguez about those pirates 23 years ago, I thought I was just doing a small favor for someone who had been kind to me. I never imagined it would lead to this." She gestured toward the window, indicating the peaceful traffic of interstellar commerce. Ben smiled. "That's the beauty of the archive, HFY. Every entry started with someone who thought they were just doing a small favor. But humans understand that there are no small favors, only small imaginations about what those favors might lead to."